All right, we are live. Welcome to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Jerry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. And today we're talking about surveillance. Bless you.
Sneeze. I was looking for the mute button. Didn't get
I'm
there in
watching
time. I was looking for the mute button.
Is it called what's it called? Is it a cough button? Isn't there something in broadcasting?
Is there?
Yeah,
I don't know.
it has some name.
Cough button.
I think that's what it's called. Let me look that up real quick.
Cough block? Cough blocks?
I think
Cough
that's what it is. No, it's a cough button.
Yeah.
That temporarily stops recording when you're.
Blocks is one of the types of companies that makes it. Huh.
All right. But diving into the to-dos here, we've got our Country Shore giveaway. Country Shore is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countryshoreoutfitters.com, buy an awesome Country Shore hat like this one. The winner this week of the Country Shore giveaway is Joe W. from Gaithersburg, Maryland. That's my old neck of the woods, just next to Bethesda, Maryland. So Joe, you've got a Country Shore hat heading your way, along with copies of our ebooks. Anyone who didn't win this week can hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Shore giveaway. And while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and answer our question of the week, which this past week was, does surveillance make you safer? I'm paraphrasing there. And it was actually probably a poorly worded question, because I think by definition, surveillance makes you safer. Whether it's a good idea or not, I think is probably the issue. But it was across the board yeses on that one. We also had a bonus question of the week, which was, do androids dream of electric sheep? And it was across the board yes on that one too. So not much disparity in the results, but I guess that's to be expected, especially for the surveillance one.
Yeah, I think so. That. I mean, I'm always surprised by straight one way or the other, but that was kind of the way I was leaning. So
I was a little more surprised at the androids dreaming of electric sheep responses. I would have thought someone in there would have thought that androids didn't dream, but who am I to judge? The question of the week coming up for this next week, our topic coming up is data privacy. So the question of the week this week is, has your data ever been hacked? Parentheses that you know of. So have you ever been like alerted that your data is out there? Or, I think there's all sorts of services, products and services now that track whether your social security number is out in the wild, that kind of stuff. So if you've ever heard that your data is out there, let us know. And if you haven't, you're lucky. I don't know that I have actually been notified that my data's definitely been leaked.
So definitely we've gotten to the point where we've accidentally checked in credentials to GitHub, and then AWS and GitHub will be like, hey, you checked in credentials. You should probably make sure you wanted to do that.
I guess that counts. Checking private credentials into a public repo. I guess that's more idiocy more than getting hacked.
Yeah. Yes, this is true.
But I guess it probably counts. I guess with that, we can sort of dive into this week's topic. Let me pull my notes up real quick because I forgot to grab my printout from the printer because I'm old school and I like having paper copy. But I guess just to start off, this was kind of, I don't know if you've ever read about or heard about the panopticon, Jeremy Bentham's theory for a perfect surveillance complex, where basically you have, it's basically like a ring. It's a lot like what a lot of modern maximum security prisons look like, but you have like a ring of cells where the inmates live, and then just like one central tower where the glass is double-sided, so that you never know if you're actually being watched. I mean, the odds are you're not being watched, because I mean, technically his idea was you could have one person monitoring hundreds of people, because the idea is that if you never know when you're being watched, you have to assume that you're always being watched.
Right.
And it's sort of like the start of this massive surveillance philosophy, where if there's always eyes on you, you're going to be that much more hesitant to step out of line. So I guess that's kind of a cool place to start, because that's back in like the 18th century that Bentham was writing, sort of the beginnings of utilitarianism, excuse me.
And it always makes you wonder if these NSA leaks are intentional, because like if for the same reason, if you think that you're being watched, you're much more likely to behave. And so really the NSA may not have the capabilities they actually purport to have, but just the fact that you think they have those capabilities will keep you kind of in line.
That's a super cheap way to do it. I mean, I guess it's like putting up security cameras that aren't on or recording at all, or putting up, signs in your front yard that say house secured by XYZ
ADT.
company. Yeah, and you have absolutely no security system at all.
Right, right. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that were actually true.
That's interesting. I never even thought of that. It might all just be a bunch of lies, which I wouldn't put that past the government. There's a quote from 1984. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. You had to live in the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. So I guess that sort of leads into the dystopian aspect of massive surveillance. Um, maybe a good place to start in is the social scoring that China has implemented, and that a lot of places are talking about implementing. There was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal today about the EU being all up in arms because they're starting to dip their toes into something similar, which is basically a score tracking your behavior both in public and especially online, and sort of tracking you with a metric that determines, how far outside of the norm you are. And there's been a huge blowback from that, where people are basically like, we don't want this kind of invasion of privacy or overstepping of government oversight. So it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, as seen in our Facebook poll, surveillance does make you safer, but I think if it goes too far, it sort of dehumanizes the people that it's monitoring.
I love the idea of a social score. I love it. I think it's great. I think that humans have given up on the ability, like not they've proven that they can't police themselves to be decent human beings.
So throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, 100%. Like,
Surveil everyone
yeah,
because the
yeah.
majority of people can't take
I
care of the
firmly
surveil
believe
themselves.
I firmly believe that as a collective, humanity has lost like the benefit of the doubt that they're going to act appropriately and for the betterment of society. Like basically, humans always look as a collective, humanity always looks for the way to kind of step on the heads of others. Always. That's like human nature, as a matter of fact. So in the history of humanity, I think that we have enough body of work to prove that we are not good at policing ourselves.
The interesting counterpoint potentially is that humans, and this goes against that it's human nature, which I tend to agree with you on, but that you are, I guess, applying a band-aid instead of getting to the root of the problem. That people are acting in ways that they wouldn't otherwise act in if social reality was different for large groups of people. So instead of getting to whatever the root cause of the problem is for, say, property crime, you're basically saying property crime is going to always happen in these massive numbers. So let's at least install cameras and other sorts of monitoring devices to catch the people who are committing property crime, and sort of giving up on the hope that you could solve property crime or whatever crime it is by implementing policies that would preclude people from doing it in the first place. But I think you're on the side of people are always going to do it no matter what policies you put in place.
Correct. I think the root issue is humanity. Like you take a look at all the, like when you take like property crime, physical crime, white collar crime, when you take all these things and you look at the common denominator, it's always humanity. Like that is the common denominator. Like it's almost like that Rick and Morty show where Rick and his sister are mortified that like this collective alien is taking over total races of human or like total populations of planets, and then they find out what happens when like the collective loses control and the humans go back to being like humans, and they're like, oh, it really wasn't so bad after all. Like I think humans need to be controlled. Especially so either you have so few people that you don't have like too much human interaction, Or you like tightly control the population. So you either have like population control or you have population control. Like,
or
so
control the population. One or
you
the other.
either limit the number or you actually limit the people. I mean, and that's, I think I mean, again, and I think that if I would find it tough to argue against me in this case, but you may say, I'd rather have the crappy human nature than have the government kind of dictate what is right and wrong. That's the only kind of argument that I would actually accept, because I'm so convinced that humanity is inherently broken that I would totally accept if you say, okay, yeah, humans are by and large miserable people, and the more people you put together, the worse the situation gets. But I'm willing to take that than government surveillance. But the thing is, then that person has to stop complaining about how awful humans are, because they've accepted it. So either you accept it or you don't. And if you don't accept it, then really the only solution is to control humanity, because they're always going to revert back to just their base awfulness.
It's interesting too. When you look at Asian countries, and we've talked about this before too, where crime is insanely low. It's basically non-existent, except for corporate corruption. They seem to have insane amounts of corporate corruption, and they probably understate the data. And they have like massive gang problems too in Japan and China. So it's not all gravy. But what I was going to say is one thing that those countries do that a lot of Western countries don't is that people work like 100 hours a week. So they're basically never not working. So there's so much less time to actually commit crime, period. That probably skews the numbers. And if, they were working 35 or 40-hour weeks like most Western countries, you'd probably see crime rates that much higher.
Right. And this is actually, you touch on a good point, where keeping people busy is a great way to keep the awfulness of humanity in check.
Well, the other thing I was going to say there too, not to jump in, but it's sort of the running theme of this Text Ethics series is technological solutions to technological problems. And the fact of the matter is that people are going to be useless, more and more useless as the years go by, to the point where humans are basically completely useless within the next 100 years, maybe even not that long. I mean,
you mean in the fact that they won't be contributing to
they'll have nothing to do. They'll have no job. They'll have no responsibilities on a day-to-day basis.
Right. I mean, so their function will basically be like keeping their children safe. That's like will be their main function, is like caring for their offspring, so to speak.
Yeah, and finding ways to waste their time. Like, and this is, I guess, it's a sidebar, but like I think a universal income is on the way, because people aren't going to be paid at all because they won't have jobs. So their function will also be to not only consume products, but to purchase products and services. That they'll basically just be money spenders, I think, within the not that it's almost there already, but at least most people have jobs still. But most of those jobs will become completely obsolete, and probably for the best. I mean, there's no reason that humans necessarily need to do menial labor. I mean, if AI can drive a truck, there's no reason that a couple million people need to be driving trucks around. It's not necessarily like the most glamorous job. Nothing against truck drivers, by the way. My dad was a truck driver back in the day. It's just that these jobs are going to be gone. And so with this massive amount of time the technology is produced for people, and in lieu of some sort of overarching ethical system or overarching totalitarian government oversight, you're going to have these technological solutions to keep people in control.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And you actually kind of were summed up my theory about the awfulness of humanity, which is it's directly proportionate to the lack of things to do and the more they're connected. So like, actually, I guess it's inversely and directly proportionate. So the less people have to do and the more connected they are, the more awful humanity is. And so you have the internet, which connects people through social media and makes it easier than ever to be up other people's business and to get offended or whatever. And then you have basically the declining of things to actually do, like of responsibilities, of job functions. And those two things, they're going to start rapidly accelerating.
Yeah.
And I think you're just going to get more and more awfulness. And I mean, I challenge anyone to say that I'm wrong. Whether you're on the right or the left, there's so much social conflict these days. And it's not just, it didn't just happen. It's a direct correlation between those two factors.
It's so interesting too, because so much of this stuff you want to say, I wish we could go back to insert year here that probably was pretty horrible anyway, but at least didn't have a lot of the technological issues that we have. It's only going to, I don't want to say get worse, but the problems are only going to become more exacerbated as the years go by. I mean, it's only going to become more prevalent in our lives. So, you know, it's not, you can't put your head in the sand, bury your head in the sand and ignore this stuff. You sort of have to say it's here. There's no way to stop it. So what are we going to do? It's like pragmatism against, you know,
Manifest destiny.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's like idealism is what the word I was looking for.
Sure.
Like you wish that we didn't need massive surveillance, but practically, there's really no other solution when you have this many people with this much time on their hands.
Right. So basically, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm kind of not into the business of saying which way it should be. But basically, if you're not for government controls, then just be prepared for like people, more and more people to start believing in these pizza sex ring type stuff, and more people who just scream at you for using like the word crazy in an online forum. Just be prepared for it. That's all I'm saying is you have to be realistic about this. You can't have both, right? Like it's only going one direction. And in order to stop it from going in that direction, you have to put maximum brakes on it like now. And that's what I'm saying is like, I'm not saying we should go to massive surveillance, but if we don't like the way this is going, then that is really the only solution to the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at it realistically, maximum brakes, like we're pedal to the metal on all this stuff. Like it's not slowing down. It's getting faster and faster. We're pedal to the metal, like going down a steep downhill.
Right.
With wind at our back.
Right.
There was an interesting thing that I came across. It was, I think it was Foucault wrote back in the 70s or 80s that he said, as capital punishment declined and as violence stopped being a solution to, and like public, public hangings or public executions, is that stopped being, socially acceptable. Like once violence decreases, the only thing left is it's like fear or shame, basically. And so we've sort of gone both those routes in terms of being constantly monitored, and especially with the social media aspect, sort of, and the second you step out of line on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or anything, you're immediately ostracized by the larger community. Remember, there was that story of the girl who she tweeted something. She was going to Africa or something. She tweeted some joke about AIDS or something like that, and like got on the flight with no internet, landed in Africa like 16 hours later, and her life was basically over. Like her job was gone. So I mean, it's the solution for the technological reality of our time, I guess.
Well, it's kind of funny because I had this exact conversation with someone who fancies themselves as a social justice warrior. And basically I said the same thing, like, because this person's point was, we're not out to ostracize people. We're out to kind of teach them that what they're doing is offensive. And I said that you may say that, but that's not the community at large, because jumping at someone and screaming at them and telling them how ignorant they are and trying to get them fired, that's not feedback. That's not teaching. You're still trying to get them to change their behavior, but not through education. You're trying to get them to change their behavior through fear. That's what you're trying to do, which again, fine. Fear is an effective tool, but let's not call it teaching, let's call a spade here. Like you are being Machiavellian. Like you are saying that it's better to be feared than loved, which Machiavelli himself agreed to if you're trying to modify behavior. But be honest about it.
Yeah. What was the actual Machiavelli quote? But he said you didn't want to be hated, you wanted
Right,
to be feared.
right, right.
There's a difference, I guess.
Well,
And I guess that goes to your point because when that level of vitriol is thrown at somebody, they're not afraid of the crowd so much as they despise the crowd, and it probably just makes them more assured of their position.
right, because and the reason Machiavelli said that is because when they hate you, it leads to backlash.
Yeah,
And if we're being honest, you see the person that these people hate the most, Donald Trump, was in direct response to this hatred that these people caused. Like
yeah. The entire alt right movement is basically people
a
who are sick of
backlash.
being told how terrible they were.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, there was an interesting quote I came across in the journal article today about surveillance. Another camp, including industry representatives and some researchers, argued for more restraint, saying that it's too early to apply broad regulation to the field and that strict rules could rein in innovation or simply drive research to other parts of the world, the person said. The interesting thing to me there is even the argument against limiting this stuff, the counter argument is that it limits stuff that like it's sort of a circular argument, but it's something that I hear a lot is that if we want to slow down the pace of innovation, we can't do that because it slows down the pace of innovation. Like we just have to constantly be trying new stuff without regards to what the outcomes will be about or what the long-term effects will be. That sort of seems to be the technological mindset at this point. And I don't know if you think that's right or wrong or misguided.
I don't know that I think it's right or wrong. I just think it is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
just the reality of the situation. There's no
yeah,
escaping it.
exactly. I've just given up trying to determine if something is right or wrong, and just kind of focus on is it what it is, and can it change something? You know what I mean? Like that's basically all that I can do anymore is basically make observations and
It's knowing what you can change, knowing what you can, and knowing the difference.
right,
The
right.
kind of
And there's
golden rule of life.
a whole lot that I can change.
Yeah. Or that society at large can change. I think it's incredible to see it's like Thanos, the inevitability of the technological sector gaining the reins of power. Like it's sort of there's no way to stop it really without some sort of mass government movement. But I think the problem there is that they're so I invested both financially and just in terms of influence in the government itself that it's going to be tough to get any sort of massive pushback. I guess something's happening now with tech sector regulation, but I think I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know what type of regulation we're talking about. It's weird. Like what it's definitely a hot button issue. Meaning like the Democrats and even Republicans are using it to kind of gain favor with their base.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, I don't know how many people care that Facebook knows a lot about them. I don't know how many people actually care.
Is that what they're trying to regulate mostly? The Facebook stuff?
Yeah, but and again, like what would the regulation look like? I don't even know. Like they have to like show auditors. They have to let auditors come in and see how they're securing the data or something like that. And would any government auditor know better than anyone at Facebook on how to keep data secure?
Well, therein lies the problem too with regulation with the tech industry. And this is an upcoming episode, but it's an awesome, really interesting sidebar. Is that, and maybe that's why companies that are at the forefront of technologies, whatever the sector they may be in, whether it's energy or health or social media or search or whatever, it's that the layperson, not even the layperson, even the specialist who works for the regulatory agencies aren't going to have the necessary knowledge to know what to look for. I mean, that was the whole financial crisis of 2007, 2008. There's probably only half a dozen people who were involved in the regulatory arms who even knew that something was amiss. Everyone else had to take the banks at their word that they understood the risk and everything was fine, because they had no idea what it meant, the numbers they
Right.
were looking at.
Well, and
It's largely similar here. It's you want regulation, you want oversight, but the overseers have no idea what to look for.
and like the same thing happened with the Boeing thing, the 737 Max.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
like Boeing was self-certifying because like the government's like, yeah, we don't know, we don't know if this is good or not. Like we don't know this stuff. So like Boeing was just like self-certifying. Yeah, this looks good. Yep, good to go.
Rubber stamp.
Yeah, exactly. So,
approval.
I mean, that's what I don't understand is what are these regulators going to do? Are they going to send in like, you know, some 80-year-old man who's going to like tour the Facebook campus and be like, yeah,
learn how to fly in a biplane? Oh, I thought you were talking about the aviation.
And Zuckerberg's like, yeah, we just showed him, like, basically he probably just showed him like the cafeteria. What do you
yeah.
I mean, they're pretty secure, and that burrito was delicious.
Rubber stamp.
Yeah.
Clear at Facebook. Let's talk about some interesting monitoring issues. There was San Francisco actually just banned facial recognition, which is weird. San Francisco is the weirdest place because they're sort of the root of all of this stuff, and yet they are the most anti-authoritarian place in the world. It's such a weird mix, and I guess it comes to a front all the time because like you have the local residents all up in arms about rents increasing and Google having their buses park at public bus stations, which is just the boldest move. I mean, that's so Google. But anyways, they banned facial recognition software, and one of the reasons is that it misidentifies Black people and women a lot. Facial recognition software.
It does what? Say that again.
Misidentifies Black people and women, apparently.
Oh, so it'll say like they'll be like
looking for criminal A and identify person B as criminal A.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess the response to that is give the software time. This was having to do with Amazon's recognition software, which we've used before. And it's newish recognition software. So I assume those kinks will be worked out soon. I guess until those kinks are worked out, you can't implement it on a large scale, theoretically. Or worse that happens is that it misidentifies someone and it makes someone's life, I guess, difficult for a period of time.
It's what's interesting is that by definition, that is the type of software that only gets better the more it's used.
That's a great point. Yeah. Any sort of reinforcement learning by definition improves over time, unless you overfit. But I don't think that would be an issue with this particular case. Another one I came across was I guess this one's weird to me. I don't know. I just don't get this one. But apparently they're installing microphones in schools to pick up raised voices or like heightened like aggressive situations. The microphones are trying to respond to it proactively. And they have it in office buildings and hospitals and stuff. And I think the purpose is to prevent future violence in schools, but I think for the most part, the violence wasn't necessarily precipitated by aggression or raised voices or any sort of incident. It was sort of like a pre-planned thing that just started. And I don't know that we want microphones constantly monitoring our interactions. That seems like a weird thing. That's one thing with this surveillance stuff that seems weird, is that it's trying to homogenize human behavior to a certain extent, which I guess to your point has to be done. But that seems weird, installing microphones to monitor people's, like to keep tabs on how people are communicating with each other.
Yeah, exactly. It is weird. It is weird, but it's effective.
Fourth Amendment, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. A lot of people are up in mass surveillance, basically completely undercutting the Fourth Amendment. But maybe that's a scenario where if the founding fathers had known that 95% of people aren't going to live on farms, and pretty soon, like, massive amounts of people aren't going to have anything to do, maybe they would have rethought that wording.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, if you would have told them how technology would evolve, the Constitution, Bill of Rights would look a lot different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing that some of that stuff has even held up as long as it has. But yeah, we're going to continue to try to fit a increasingly square peg in a round hole as technology advances beyond what the founders could envision.
Let's end here with the I would say largest consumer producer of data, which is Google, and they've stepped in it a couple times with a lot of their technologies, just with regards to surveillance and privacy. Google Glass was a complete failure. I think Google Clips, which I hadn't heard of, but apparently it's just a camera that will take pictures when a certain scenario is met. So I guess the use case is you put it in your baby's crib and you get cute pictures whenever they're smiling, or if they're playing with a toy or something like that. Or it'd probably be good for dogs too, when dogs
Right,
feel
right.
things. Um, but what Google is doing now in Toronto, I don't know if you've heard about this with Google Sidewalks, but basically it's like a little town on the waterfront of Toronto that Google has bought, and they're trying to build like it's like 14 acres, 15 acres, something like that, and they're trying to build a completely self-contained complex that is sort of like across the board monitored, and they're just pulling data on traffic, they're pulling data on energy usage, and they're also pulling data on like how people are just going about their days. So like constantly monitoring how people constantly monitoring everything at all times, and then just using that massive pool of data to, I guess, improve the town, the local reality of that town, which a lot of people have been up in arms about because they don't want all this data being pulled constantly. I guess the rejoinder would be just don't live there.
Right. I
Uh,
mean, that's the other thing that gets me is like this whole new belief that you have like kind of a right to live somewhere in particular.
in
It's
exactly the way that you want to live there.
exactly the way you want to live there. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I guess in conclusion, surveillance is here and it's not going away. So we need to think about how to, I guess, not even how to surveil the right way. It's sort of just why it's here, why it has to be here, and why it can't go away, and just sort of live with that reality, and hope that it doesn't turn into 1984.
Right. Right. I know. I mean, that's it. Just kind of hope it doesn't get there.
Well, I guess we'll leave it on that note. That hopeful note that we don't devolve into a Orwellian dystopia. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to check out the blog post for this episode at gunnertech.com. The podcast will be available on iTunes. Check out our ebooks on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. Hop on our Facebook page and enter the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystore.outfitters.com. And while you're on our Facebook page, answer our question of the week, which this week coming up is, has your data ever been hacked that you know of? So let us know in the comments. And I guess let us know, too, if your data has been hacked, like what was hacked and how it was hacked and stuff like that. It'd be interesting to see. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Make sure to tune in next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.